sampling. And ta-da, you go to sampling, which is like a word pun of sampling or sample and playing. So you're kind of playing the sample. And that's why I'm using this word here. And I'm trying to samplay a little bit with words myself here. And so the idea for this talk is to kind of throw some sort of concepts from our seminar, some sociological stuff at you, but not in a traditional academic way, but more in a kind of funny way. And so I'd like to, just give you some concepts that might resonate with you, do something with you. And I'm not trying to tell you what sample music is. I'm not trying to essentialize that because that's not also not my perspective academically. I don't think sample music can be defined by someone in academia or anywhere else, but anyone who's doing sample music defines it by doing it and by redefining it every time you are doing it. If we look at the two words, sample and play, and we just look into the connotations of these words, that's where I started to get to the concepts that I would like to throw at you. We already have everything we need. Because if you look into the dictionary for sample, what we find is, obviously, first it can be a musical thing. So sample as a piece of music, that's the stuff that we all know and why we're here. Then we can also think of sample as a form of representation. So for example, the doctor takes some blood from you and then does some research on the blood as a representation of you. So in the end, maybe the blood turns out to have certain viruses inside, whatever, and then the doctor comes back and tells you, you have this and this disease, and you should be treated this and that way. So that's also connotation of sample. And then it's also the connotation of trying out something. So I sampled the wine, and it was really great. So there we have this notion of experimenting, trying out, and also judging, my own judgment. I can judge whether I like the wine or not. I don't care if other people like it or not. I mean, in fact, I would probably care, but the idea is that also in trying out, we can judge on our own. So that's it for sample, but there's many more things for play, actually. So again, music. We can play a music instrument. We can play music. Then we have enjoyment, as when kids are playing in park. So this also entails a connotation of it's free of seriousness, it's free of harm, it's just joyful, playful. Then we have it in game or also sports. So we have rules, we have roles. So we have we have to, if you want to play a game or a game of sports, we have to obey these rules for that game, and we are playing different parts in that game. These are the roles. Then we have acting. In acting also, we have roles, and we have the actors, and we have, what is also important, the scripts. So, someone writes a play, he writes a script, the actors try to follow the script. But then again, on the other side, we have improvisation. So sometimes people would act on a stage without a script. Then we have the connotation of play, which is playback, which is like, can you play the last seconds of the video again, please? Something like that. So this, it links to copying or just reproducing without changing anything. But then we have almost the opposite one in the notion of there's this word that, for example, the wings of the airplane have a certain play. So it means like they can move within a certain boundary, but within that they can freely move. So we have this notion of free motion. And freedom. And then we have competition, of course, so he played his opponent, or he plays the system, or something like that. We have this kind of competition or outsmarting others kind of thing. And then we have, again, the opposite. We have collaboration, so which is, for example, when Alex came here earlier, he said, thanks to all of us who played a part in setting this thing up here. So we all have this, we have all of these connotations in these two words. And now what I try to do, and another one, we have relevance. So some issues are at play. So also here we have relevance, importance, seriousness, which is again the opposite of enjoyment without seriousness. So we can then map these things, and that's my offer to you, to have this kind of conceptual space which I really see as a space. You can use that if you want, you don't need to. And we will now use it to look at 3 case studies. So we have all these opposing things. Let me start with the script versus improvisation on the horizontal axis on top. So the script would mean a set of rules and roles where you kind of, you're guided in your behavior if you follow a script. And a script can be anything from the way that you should greet each other when you meet, or the way you're dressing. For example, here I'm wearing my bass cap, because here I'm in a sample music festival. When I'm talking in scientific conferences, often I do not wear bass caps there, because it's not part of the script. But then there's improvisation on the opposite pole, which means that sometimes I can just improvise. I could do something weird. I could, just start, I don't know, running away if I wanted. It's weird, but I could do it. And then we have below we have the opposite poles of playing something back the way it is, just playing it like the sample. I just play the sample. I play, I don't know, Beat It, Michael Jackson. I just play it. Cool. Okay, that doesn't make me a really awesome DJ or anything. But once I start playing it anew in some other ways, for example, I have it twice on both of my turntables, and then I'm starting backspinning it, already I'm starting to create something new, and that might have something to do also with what we call authorship. So in when do we think that someone is creating new music? It's always when you change something. And then on the vertical, we have the for fun versus the for real aspect. So we can do sample music just for fun at home with our friends, etc. Or we can start earning money with it. We can, produce records and get rich or whatever. And then there's this opposition of doing it together and being connected, and the opposite would be doing it against each other or being disconnected from each other, as in battles, for example, which is actually a hybrid. Okay, so now we can try to use this conceptual space to make sense of sample music, or sampling, what I coined it here. And I want to do this with 3 very known, often discussed cases. The first one is the case of the invention of scratching. So how the turntable was turned into an instrument by people using it in different ways. So we have these guys here, and there's this famous story that the Grand Wizard Theater invented scratching one day when he was at home. I'm sure most of you know the story. So he was at home practicing, and then his mom came in, and he had to stop doing. She was saying like, "Your music is too loud." So he would just stop the record where it was, and he had his headphones on, and he would just go back and forth, back and forth. His mom was talking. He was not listening, but he was listening here, and he would understand that these sounds, they are pretty cool. Why not try to use them? So that's the story. If it really happened like that, I don't know. Historians, whatever, doubt. There are always these stories of someone doing something first, and it almost never is true, but whatever. It doesn't really matter, because the point is that we have to understand that this invention took place in the context of the 1970s New York City block parties in Harlem. And in these block parties, they would battle, DJ crews would battle each other. And there was a first phase where they would battle each other more by showing off with amplifying power. So the one with the bigger speakers and louder music, they would win. But then at some point, you couldn't get any louder, and also the songs were always the same, so it wouldn't really matter anymore what you were playing or how loud, but more like how you played it, the way you mixing it together. And then came the phase where DJs like Theodore or Grandmaster Flash, who are in these pictures, improved the battling by actually doing something else with the records. And so they started violating 2 scripts. The first one was the script I was just talking about, of the being loud. That was the rule, that was the game, being louder, but that game was over, so we had to invent a new game. So they had to violate this script by improvising. And then came the second, even probably, for us it doesn't sound so weird anymore, but it was super weird at the time, because the script for record players was this. You take the needle, you put it on, and that's it. And you never, ever have can ever touch the record with your hand, because that's all totally forbidden. That's what, what everyone would learn from their parents, from the record companies, from anywhere. So just that, to imagine that someone breaks this script by improvising over it was a very big step at that time. So there's a quote by a guy who's a historian of hip-hop music, and he writes, "Scratching is, like its hip-hop cousin graffiti, an art of vandalism. It's like a celebration of noise, and no doubt part of the pleasure it brought to DJs came from the knowledge that it annoyed the older generation. Just as graffiti artists tagged their city with spray paint, DJs using phonograph needles etched their own signatures into the city's soundscape." Yeah, so again, we have the grip here that we can use. So we have this, for fun part, we are playing around, and it becomes real because it goes to the battles. We are not only playing music back, we are playing it new. We're improvising over scripts, and we're doing it together by teaching each other the latest tricks, but we're also doing it against each other in the battle. So that's one case. Second case is, anyone knows the Winstons? Has anyone heard of the Winstons? Someone over there, one? Some people here? Okay, that's probably because you guys are here at the Sample Music Festival, but most people don't know the Winstons, I'm sure. But if you listen to this, I'm sure you all have heard this. I hope, oh shit, okay. Let me get here, because I'm prepared. No, I'm not. How can you put this on the line in? Müsste, sie hat es reingesteckt.
Ist das im Line drin?
Ich weiß nicht, wo der Line ist. Ist der Line an?
Jeremy? Is this open here? This one?
Ah, jetzt wird. Ja, okay. Computer says no. Ja, dann, oh, da hört man das. Nee, warte, ich muss das machen. Okay, alles klar. So, ja. So you know that? That's the original break. And it's a break of a record I'm just talking about in a second, but just listen to some examples of what has been made with it.
Straight out of Compton, crazy motherfucker named Ice Cube, from the gang called niggas with attitudes.
Yeah, and so on. I don't want to play this too long because we are probably ran out of time. Okay. Okay. So that image over here shows that this break has been sampled by lots of people. I think some people counted 1,500 at least. The song was by the Winstons, and it's on the B-side of a record called Color Him Father, and it's called the Amen Brother. That's the song. And within that song, there's this 6 seconds break by the drummer. The drummer is called G.C. Coleman. And this first was sampled in the 80s by hip-hop artists like NWA that you just heard. So they would, by using their new script of sampling beats from 60s, 70s soul and funk music, would just do that like they would do it with any other type of break, and they would just sample it and put some new layers over it and rap, and that's it. But then, across the Atlantic in the UK, people started freaking out even more. So they would use this sample and dissect it into little parts and create music that we now know as jungle music. And almost every jungle song has this break as the fundamental sample set, which is crazy. So it's a whole genre just exists because of this drum break. Anyway, so there was a way that the musicians in the UK kind of chose themselves to limit themselves within the boundaries of that break, but to express creativity within that. by reordering it ever again, and that's the impro part again. So the Ammon break became sort of a common good that everyone could use for free and use it for fun or for real, make money with it, whatever they liked. So in a sense, everyone was together in this using of the Ammon break. But not everyone, actually, because the Winstons were out of the of that calculation, because they were actually to the mid or late 90s not even aware that their break was being used. So then the BBC and the Economists, the Economist and BBC and other journals, they started interviewing the guy who owned the rights to that music, and that was the lead singer of the Winstons, Richard Spencer. And he was really annoyed and angry, and he said that it feels like plagiarism, and he feels like being ripped off and raped. That's what he said. And the drummer had died already, and he died poorly, so he wasn't really getting anything out of it. So then some people started feeling guilty about that story and set up a campaign, a fundraising campaign to get some money to give it back to Mr. Spencer. And eventually that campaign rose 24,000 UK pounds. I don't know what this is in dollars, but it's probably a lot, and gave it back to the Spencer guy. It's of course not as much as he would have earned if he had if he really played his rights there, but it's at least something. Okay. So again, we have all of these aspects here. We have this for fun, for real kind of the problematic divide, and the together and against script, improvisation, and playback versus play new. So then comes the final case study here, which is the digital days. I'm referring here to a book by another author called The Analog Days, so I'm just playing again with words here. So I'm sure that you're all aware of this Serato-type Scratch software that people here are using. I'm seeing these here on the computers. So it's a way of translating MP3 music or any music in your computer back on records. You have special control vinyls that have just a weird tone that is transferred in the computer to the MP3. So you can, with a real record on a real turntable, scratch anything that's on your computer. So this is kind of a weird technology because it's the MP3 being translated backwards to a really old technology, the turntable. So why is that? That may strike some people as weird. So it's interesting. And actually, Final Scratch was the first software that was released in software-hardware package in this regard, and it was in 2002. And even a year before, Pioneer released their Scratch CD player, where you could you had a disc and you could scratch the disc, and you could do actually more or less this. I'm saying the same thing. I don't think it's the same, but you could do the same more or less. So why would one take off and not the other? And some people argue, there's this historian, Fouché, I don't know how to pronounce his name correctly, but he argues that it's more than just technical reasons. Because you might argue that, oh yeah, with this little disc, it's a bit more difficult to scratch, maybe, but maybe you could learn it. But he argued that it's not because of that, but it's because the way that Serato and these type of softwares, they are preserving the turntable and the vinyl as a symbol. And that has been important to create acceptance within the hip-hop community. Because if they violated that symbol, they would violate kind of the community, the script of the community. So that was the idea here. And he has this quote here: "A racial subtext exists. Black history outside of the African continent is replete with examples of exploitation through the application of technology. Hip-hop has endowed a specific black community with the power to define and create an empowering past. Interwoven into this past are vinyl records and turntables, and it is in this context that digital technologies, which have the ability to overshadow or even erase this past, have caused many to hesitate." That's his argument. I'm not sure. He proves it with lots of quotes by people at the time, so I think there's really something to it. I don't think it may have played the same role in Europe, because maybe, hopefully, we don't have these type of debates too much in the hip-hop here, but we do, but I'm not sure how much. So, but there's also another question here, and that's about creating new markets and market niche. So now we have everything. We have companies like Ortophone. You know, they are advertising it. Real DJs play vinyls, and then we have others that say like, you take your mobile phone and you can become scratch DJ. So now there's everything. And also, and that's again something we can learn from this science and technology perspective. With the change of technology, we also change the communities and the other way around. So now we have lots of young kids anywhere around the world. They have access to this type of technologies they wouldn't have before. They are now scratching using whatever beats and music. They might not be even calling themselves hip-hop artists anymore. They just do it. So it's an ever-changing thing. So the scripts that we are talking about here, they are socio-technical, so they include the rules for both the social behavior, but also the technical behaviors. What is appropriate? What tools can we use? How can we use them? How can we not use them? What music can we play and not, and so on. And then just the maybe latest development in this kind of, because we have all this digital stuff, and we were just talking about the needle-proof skip records and all of that. That's not digital, but it's the technological advancements. But now we have this whole portablism stuff coming up, and maybe you could read it as a kind of counter-movement to this whole digitalization and professionalization of scratching, where you now have cheap equipment that everyone can afford. It's the last slide. That everyone can afford, and it's back to vinyls, and it's not more, and you're just, you can plug maybe your phone to have some beats, but that's it, and you can meet in a park. So it's much more about coming together again, going out, just improvising, having fun, don't take it too serious. So it's a kind of counter movement here. And again, we see how this grid plays in here. So that's actually what I tried to tell you today, and I just hope that maybe some of these things can help you to understand your own art better. And yeah, thanks for that.
Okay, great.